But just to
Okay.
start, like, could you just tell me a little bit about kind of the firm that you work with, maybe what type of firm it is, the types of clients, how long you've been an advisor, just like a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, our broker dealer is nationwide, but we run kind of a small practice inside of the nationwide broker dealer, family oriented with my brother and my father and our business partner. It's kind of a smattering of different demographics, but for me, it's primarily folks in the tech space, biotech space, kind of those Henrys, if you will, those high earners, not rich yet, usually have equity compensation, usually lots of questions surrounding that. And the pain points are, for most of them, is am I on track to retire when I want to? How do I fund college education for my kids as we're approaching that? And then what do I do with this equity compensation? How do I handle it? And how do I, mitigate some of the tax ramifications, if possible?
Yeah, awesome. Makes sense. So then in terms of like that was just for some background, but in terms of like where you were at kind of before you started working with me or in general, like what was kind of some of the outreach that you were doing just from a basic level? Like where had you tried doing outreach before and what were kind of some of the challenges you were seeing with the outreach?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I've tried everything. I've done cold calling, which I hated. I've done cold
Yeah.
emailing, which you can't do. There are rules against that. I've done cold LinkedIn pitching, right, and that was super unsuccessful. I've done the AI automated stuff on LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
that wasn't very successful either. So frustrating, kind of spinning my wheels, and nothing's gaining traction.
Yeah.
So it's funny, I think you sent me a message and I ignored it for 3 months and then eventually saw your post coming up and that's what
Yeah.
resonated with me. I'm like, wow, okay, I should probably talk to this guy. It sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually gonna be my next question. So like what is it kind of about? Like you said you saw some of the posts. Like what was it maybe about the post or the strategy that you saw that we used? And then obviously our conversation that we had after that that made you even kind of want to consider, working with me.
The way that, I mean, the language or I guess your post in general and then our conversation really resonated with me because it was different, and you talked to me and your post talked to me like I was, one of one and not like trying to reach a million people. So it was like super
Mhm.
personalized. Hey, so you're doing this, tell me more about that. Or, so it actually felt like I was talking to a human and being a human instead of
Yeah.
talking to a robot. And I was like, gosh, with the AI sludge out there, it was just so different.
Yeah.
And like the kind of the saying, you want to sell the way you've been sold to, right? It was kind of
Yeah.
like, wow, this resonated with me. I like this. This is how I want to talk to people
Yeah.
and like get to know them personally, right? So that
Yeah.
we can be a resource when they're ready, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that stood out for me too. Like you said in the beginning, it was more so like, the like what you think you even just said it right now. It's like you want to reach out to people the way that you want to get reached out to, right? And like I heard that first from you, and then since then I've heard it from so many other advisors, like before they ended up joining. So I feel like that is a pretty big characteristic of it, right? Like you kind of obviously everything is human first. It's the most human first business out there. So that makes sense. But no, thank you. So that's pretty clear. In terms of like working with me, right? So we've been working for, a few months here now. Like, what are your thoughts on just kind of the overall experience? Like maybe the communication feedback and like the program overall, and what kind of stands out the most?
Yeah, well, the communication, I mean, A plus, right? I mean, you lived on LinkedIn, so if I have questions, I
Yeah.
think your turnaround time is, under 5 minutes always. Usually it's like
Yeah.
30 seconds. So that's really helpful in a pinch. But, the onboarding was helpful to actually learn like what are the skills that we need to be successful in doing this, and then also the why. Why are we going through the time to learn these skills? Because at the end of the day, right, your business is kind of like teaching us how to fish instead of giving us fish, if
Yeah.
you will,
Yeah,
is probably the
exactly.
best analogy. So learning a new skill, why we do the things, how we do them, and kind of why it's important, right? If you truly want to build a business using, this kind of system, if you
Yeah,
will.
absolutely. No, that makes sense. And I appreciate that. And like, what would you say kind of stands out most? Maybe like, obviously, you talk about kind of the quick responses. That's obviously a big part of it. But like, maybe about my coaching, like on these calls, right? Or my coaching style, like, what has kind of been, what stands out the most about that, whether good or bad? But what's the biggest thing you'd say there?
Yeah, the personal feedback is huge, right? I know, like, I certainly have some mind trash when it comes to this stuff. So it's helpful to dive into real conversations. Here's what we did well. Here's what you need to improve on. Here's some suggestions you can try. How about this structure? And then also kind of developing kind of the niche that we're reaching out to, right? We spent a ton of time on LinkedIn
Yeah.
Navigator,
Yeah.
kind of narrowing down. Hey, here are the people you want to work with. Here's how we kind of get in front of them, or at least have the right list of folks so that we're not wasting our time. So
Mhm.
the weekly coaching sessions I think are helpful because I can slowly see myself getting a little bit better each week, which is
Yeah.
encouraging. And it's amazing how we review some of the conversations. It's like, God, man, you make this look so easy. You got to remember, you've been doing this for years. I've been doing it for, 4 months or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's been really helpful, right? I think that's probably the most impactful thing is, hey, here are the training programs, here's how the program works. But I think a lot of the value really comes from the personal connection and actually diving into my personal conversations with these folks so that I can get better.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. That makes sense. And then in terms of like kind of results, right? So obviously, there's a long way to go, all of that stuff, but just even so far, like in terms of maybe the replies, the conversations you're having, like your clarity on the strategy, like stuff like that. Like, what are your thoughts on kind of what you've gained so far, at least from being in the program?
Yeah, I knew it's not like a one and done quick fix. You do this once and you're good to go, right? It's certainly an
Yeah.
evolution, and I get that, right? It's like this is going to take time, and I'm building a skill over time to get better and better. So I had some nice early wins, which can happen, but pretty uncharacteristic. Like the first week, I
Yeah.
brought on a new client. The program paid for itself. Like, this
Yeah.
would be awesome, but realistically, that's not how it works, right? It
Yeah.
certainly takes some time, but the goal is, as you say, I had 2 to 5 meetings per week, which I can see as I get better at this, that being totally realistic. I'm not there yet. That's more of, my side of the house than it is your side of the house. That's just going to take more practice and kind of skill evolution along the way. So I hope that answers your question. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if
no,
it
no,
did
that's
or not.
perfect. That's perfect. And then kind of on that same topic, right? Like, why do you feel like the approach, like in terms of, like you said before, you were kind of doing a lot of outreach and kind of anywhere, right? A lot of different cold outreach, cold spam, stuff like that. Like, how do you feel that's changed in terms of just your perspective on the growth in your business? Like, do you feel like it's kind of affected that at all? Like, where it's now you kind of know where to grow a little bit more? Like, what are your thoughts on your overall business, like your overall outreach now?
Yeah, I mean, I will never spam someone again with, any AI templated crap or any, boilerplate stuff, right? It's like if that
Yeah.
doesn't resonate with people, at the end of the day, this is a belly to belly business, if you will. So it needs to be personalized. So having that personal approach and then building real relationships with, some folks who may become clients and maybe some folks won't, but at least, I know a perfect stranger from the internet and now we're connected, right? We have a really good relationship, right? And
Yeah.
maybe, who knows what that turns into down the line. Right. Of course,
Yeah.
now we're going for the low hanging fruit, but who knows what these relationships develop to be, kind of down the road. So I've appreciated that certainly. And gosh, it's funny how much stuff now I see on LinkedIn or some of the messages that I receive on LinkedIn that are canned. And it's like, did you even try? Like, this is a
Yeah.
load of, BS. Right. So it's like
Yeah.
I can like totally point that out a lot more or a lot
Yeah.
better now than I could before. And even those, it's like, I'm not opening these. Whereas if I
Yeah.
got a personal message like, oh, okay, that I would have opened and at least,
Yeah.
read and maybe responded to. But some of these, boilerplate stuff is just like I said, are you guys even trying? It's less of for those folks, it's a volume game, but for us, I don't want it to be a volume game. I want it to
Yeah.
be each message, takes time to craft and curate so that when they open it, it's like, oh, this person took the time to look at my profile, understand who I am and what I do, and just seek to learn more about me rather than just jam something down my throat.
Yeah, perfect. No, I appreciate that. And that's kind of all I had to ask. And just kind of like one last thing, if you had to maybe sum up your experience in just like one or two sentences and like whether you would recommend the programs, other advisors. If not, that's fine too, but just why or why not if you wanted to just sum everything up real quick.
Yeah, it'll be tough to do it in 2 sentences because I am long-winded, but I
Is
think
that?
it's been really beneficial for me because I felt like I was lost and I didn't know where I was going to go from an outreach perspective. And this has kind of turned it on its head, whereas I have a plan in place. I have a coach who coaches me so that I can get better. And I know it's just become easier and easier. And we're going to bring on more and more folks. And if I didn't have that, I'd probably be still sending boilerplate stuff into the ether and not getting replies. So that's been really beneficial is having a plan, having a coach, and knowing that it's a skill I'm going to build and probably use for the rest of my career.
Perfect, man. Thank you.